So in this one, I'm going to kind of explain and go over the process of how I personally carve pine cones in my wood carvings. I'm currently working on a picture frame for a friend right now, and I've got it all roughed out, and it's pretty much ready to go as far as getting the details done. I'm going to start working on the pine cones, and I'm going to kind of explain my process and how I personally carve pine cones. So I really only use 2 or 3 tools to get this done, and one of the main ones is going to be a number 3 5mm right here. The second one's going to be a really small V gouge, and it's going to be bent, a 12 3mm. Those are the main 2 chisels, and then the third thing I use is a file just to clean it up if need be, and that's going to be this one right here. So those are the 3 tools that I generally use to get the pine cones detailed, and sandpaper I suppose, but these are the main ones. So I got the pine cones all shaped here, and they're ready to be detailed. The first thing I do is just with a pencil is I just draw some kind of general grid marks just to help make sure that the individual, I guess I don't even know what they're called, the individual pieces are even and straight. I'll just draw these guidelines here just to help maintain consistency. And I'll start drawing in the individual sections here. And then how I draw it, I don't know if you guys can kind of get an understanding of what I'm doing. It's kind of like fish scales a little bit. So you do that loop there, and then at the high point of the loop, you leave just a slight gap in between this one and the next one, and then you draw the other loop over to the next, I guess, scale to the left of it, creating that individual section there. And it's totally fine to mix them up as far as sizes, like out in the natural elements. The nature is obviously not like super consistent and exact. So it's like if you got a little variation in sizes and stuff, that's not a big deal at all. It makes it look a little bit more natural if you kind of mix it up a little bit. Just kind of do your best down at the bottom. You're not gonna really see it, but you just gotta kind of give it a general shape. So if somebody does peek under here, then you got it carved. I'll just kind of touch up my gouge, make sure it's nice and sharp, because you're gonna need a sharp gouge for this, because it's very delicate, and it's gonna be prone to splitting and stuff. Okay, so the reason I use this small bent V gouge is it's really easy to control, and I personally like to outline with the V gouge first, the whole section, before I start making precise stop cuts and cleaning it up. That's what the other small gouge is for. But what I found is if you just go straight to the stop cuts like this, it's gonna chip really easy, and the scales or the individual pieces are gonna break away. So if you outline it first with your V gouge, and then you do your stop cuts and you do your precise cleanup, it's gonna look a lot more crisp, and it's gonna be a lot more stress-free. You're gonna find that you're not gonna chip out nearly as much. It's kind of tough once you start getting close to like the undercut section, or you're getting close to another piece of the carving. It's kind of tough to have these nice and clean cuts towards the ends, but you just carve as much as you can and clean it up the best you can with your other gouge or with your file. You'll kind of find as you go, you'll somewhat lose your drawing, but you can kind of get the gist of what you're doing here and still keep them looking nice and consistent. You obviously have to make sure too that you're being careful and you're not really slipping when you're approaching the undercut section and you're approaching the, I guess, main background of the carving, because you're going to create some puncture marks with your gouges and you're going to spend a bunch of time cleaning that up. So if you can do your best to control it and not make those marks, then you'll spend less time cleaning up later. Because I kind of already have that prepped and finished in how I want it, so I really don't want to make any plunge marks if I don't have to. Okay. Now again, these bottom pieces are tricky, but you just got to give it a general shape to make it look somewhat like it's supposed to. But generally you don't have to be too fussy, I would say. Now I transition to my number 3 5mm, and I'll do my plunge cuts and stop cuts, and then I'll clean it up and give it kind of that taper. Okay, so I'll just plunge the gouge right into the stroke of my V gouge and just kind of spin it like that. And you can kind of just keep doing that for a while. And just do a couple like that. Then you can do multiple at a time. Just kind of speeds up the process. Okay, and then do your taper. Kind of have to work it a little bit to clean it up next to other objects of the carving, but just gotta kind of do your best, and if you gotta dig into another tool, that's fine. But so far I found that these two really work the best. And I use my finger a lot to just clean it up, just to see how loose those pieces are, if I can get them myself, or if I have to plunge again with my gouge. A lot of times they'll just kind of flick right off like that. I blow a lot too with my mouth for air. That'll kind of, you can kind of tell how strong or weak a little piece of wood is in there too. I'll do a little scraping. I know they say, you know, don't scrape, but you can get away with a little scraping. So you just go back and forth between your plunge cuts and then your sweeping tapering cuts to create that shadow effect there for the pine cone. Now I'm gonna have to go back and do my plunge cuts here. Now if you see that, it kind of chipped on a section that I already cleaned up, so that's not that big of a deal. Just kind of flake it off, redo your plunge, and just send that taper a little deeper, just like that. Make sure you're really slow and controlled when you make that tapering sweep cut there, because if you go in fast or uncontrolled, then you're gonna chip some stuff. So sometimes you get a little greedy, or you want to speed some things up and you take too much off, or you're not paying attention and you just cut right into the cleaned scale above it. So a great way to work on these deep sections that are closer to the background, kind of the undercut section. You can see that I can't get all the way to the back. So I guess I didn't talk about it when I was picking out my tools, but you can use a knife, a small knife, to kind of get in there and get it nice and close to the background there, and then just kind of chip it. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just kind of a general, because most people are not going to see this, but it does make it a little bit more realistic and cleaner. And So it's roughly shaped now. So the next thing I do is clean it up with my file. You can really work those creases and get those fuzzies out like that. These files really come in handy because they're obviously hard tipped, so you can really get into the nooks and crannies and clean those areas up that like a regular gouge wouldn't be able to get into, or sandpaper. Sandpaper can only do so much. So like this works out great to clean up those fuzzies along those creases. So then I'll just work this with my file until it's all cleaned up. Alright, so I just finished up that pine cone. Probably took me about a half hour. If you guys have any tips or any ideas or things that you do that help you out in your carvings that you think would relate to this pine cone, then let me know. Just mention it in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one.